Okay, we are going to get into the last of chapter 2 here, and there's going to be an interaction that Omakias has with some bears. But what I want you to focus on is, what do we learn about Omakias through this interaction? So really dive deep into it. Don't just look at the surface. And I am going to probably pause and do a think aloud at a couple of points in here and then discuss afterward. All of a sudden, a rustle and then a thump in a bush ahead made Omakias freeze. A long moment passed as she stared through the dark leaves. Suddenly, crash! Two bear cubs burst from the bush and rushed pell-mell, tumbling head over heels straight for her. They came on in such a hurry that they didn't see Omakias until they were nearly in her lap. And then, with comical looks of shock, they tried to stop themselves. One flew flat on its face, bumping its nose and squealing. The other twisted in midair and landed in a heap on the ground, shaking its head in confusion at Omakias. The bear boys looked at her. Slowly, she put out her open hand filled with heartberries. Curious, the cubs jumped forward and lost their nerve. They scampered backward and then crept forward shyly again. The smaller cub seemed slightly bolder and sniffed at Omakias' hand. So right now, stepping out, kind of my impression here is that Omakias is communicating in a way with the bears. Communication is not always verbal, but she is offering them a treat. She's showing them that she won't hurt them. So stepping back in, the bear cub took one berry, then jumped away in seeming fright at its own bold act. But the taste of the berry seemed to banish fear. The two now tumbled at her, growling, mock ferocious. Their long pink tongues touched up every berry from her hands, eagerly flicking them from her fingers as fast as she could pick. They seemed to like the game. It could have gone on for hours, that is, until she stood upright. Then they tumbled backward in alarm. Their chubby bottoms rolled them over like playing balls, and she laughed out loud. She realized they had thought Omakias was their own size. They were astonished, the same way Omakias had been the first time she saw the trader unfold a seeing glass, something he called a telescope, a long, shiny tube that grew in his hands. And I'm going to step out here, and I noticed that Omakias mentions a trader, someone that they trade with, and a seeing glass. So I'm thinking right now that this was probably the only time, or the first time, Omakias had seen the white man. The white men were there. They were trading with the natives. And so all of that was new to Omakias. She saw the white man, and she saw a seeing glass, like a telescope. And it was very, very surprising for her. And she compared that to the way the baby bears were astonished when she stood up. It's that similar feeling of astonishment. She bent down again. "I needn't, little brothers," she said to them kindly, and they came forward. So once again, she's communicating with them. This time she does speak to them, and it encourages the bears to come forward to her. She looked around. No mother bear. Omakias was well aware that she shouldn't stay so close to these cubs, but after all, they seemed deserted. She looked around again. They were orphans. Perhaps the mother bear's skin was now draped across old Tallow's bed, although she hadn't heard about a recent kill. But still, no mother bear in sight, and these little ones so hungry. Wouldn't her big sister be thrilled when Omakias returned with these two new brothers? Eagerly, Omakias began to plan out her triumphant walk back to the house. She would enter the little clearing with the cubs, one at her heels and one before her. Everyone would make way, impressed. She would lead the bear cubs around the fire 4 times before she presented one of them to Angeline, who would look at her with new respect. There was no warning. One moment, Omakias was wiggling a leafy stick, making it move on the ground so the cubs would jump on it, biting fiercely. The next moment, she found herself flipped over on her back and pinned underneath a huge, powerful, heavy thing that sent down a horrible stink. It was the sow bear, the mother, breathing on her a stale breath of decayed old deer hides and skunk cabbages and dead mushrooms. Woof! The surprising thing was, Amakias realized later, that although she had no memory of doing so, she had the scissors out of their case and open, the sharp ends pointing at the bear's heart. But she didn't use them as a knife. She knew for certain that she should not move. If the bear began to bite and claw, she would have to plunge the tip of the scissors straight in between the bear's strong ribs, use all of her strength, sink the blade all the way in to the rounded hilt, and then jump clear, if she could, while the bear went through its death agony. If she couldn't get clear, Amakias knew she would have to roll up in a ball and endure the bear's fury. She would probably be clawed from head to foot, bitten to pieces, and scattered all over the ground. Until the mother bear made the first move. Amakias knew she should stay still, or as still as possible, given the terrified jumping of her heart. For long moments, the bear tested her with every sense, staring her down with her weak eyes, listening, and most of all, smelling her. The bear smelled the morning's moose meat stew Amakias had eaten, the wild onion seasoning, and the dusty bit of maple sugar from old tallow stuck to the inside of her pocket. How she hoped the bear did not smell the bear-killing dogs or the bear claw that swung on a silver hoop from old Tallow's earlobe. Perhaps the bear smelled the kind touch of Grandma and Mama's bone and spruce-wood comb, her baby brother's cuddling body, the skins and mats she had slept in, and little Pinch, who had whined and sobbed the night before. The bear smelled on Amakias' skin the smell of its own cousin's bear grease used to ward off mosquitoes, fish from the night before last. The berries she was eating, the bear smelled all. Amakias couldn't help but smell her back. Bears eat anything, and this one had just eaten something ancient and foul. Ugh. Amakias took shallow breaths. Perhaps it was to take her mind off the scent of dead things on the bear's breath that she accidentally closed the scissors, shearing off a tiny clip of bear fur, and then, to cover her horror at this mistake, started to talk. "Nokomis," she said to the bear, calling her grandmother, "I didn't mean any harm. I was only playing with your children. Gawin onjira. Please forgive me." The bear cuffed at Amakias, but in a warning manner, and not savagely to hurt. Then the bear leaned back, nose working, as though she could scent the meaning of the human words. Encouraged, Amakias continued, "I fed them some berries. I wanted to bring them home to adopt them, have them live with me at my house as my little brothers. But now that you're here, grandmother, I will leave quietly. These scissors in my hands are not for killing, just for sewing. They are nothing compared to your teeth and claws." So to step out here and thinking about this whole interaction with Amakias and the baby bears and the mother bear, one thing I noticed is the respect that Amakias shows. We know that Native Americans tend to be respectful to all nature, all animals, and instead of freaking out and attacking the bear, she did exactly what she knew how to do, which was stay still and calm. But then she greets the bear with respect. Nokomis is a title of respect. It is grandmother. And so she's showing the bear respect. She's apologizing. She's explaining that she did not mean any harm and that she was playing with and wanting to take care of the bear cubs. So Amakias is acting true to her culture and showing the bear respect. She's not screaming. She's not trying to defend herself. She knows that she was playing with this bear's children, and so she's apologizing. And indeed, Amakias's voice trembled slightly as the bear made a gurgling sound deep in her throat and bared her long, curved, yellowish teeth, so good at ripping and tearing. But having totaled up all of the smells and sifted them for information, the bear seemed to have decided that Amakias was no threat. She sat back on her haunches like a huge dog. Swinging her head around, she gave a short, quick slap at one of the cubs that sent it reeling away from Amakias. It was as though she were telling them they had done wrong to approach this human animal and should now stay away from her. Amakias's heart squeezed painfully. Even though it was clear her life was to be spared, she felt the loss of her new brothers. I wouldn't ever hurt them, she said again. The little cubs piled against their mother, clung to her. For a long moment, the great bear sat calmly with them, deciding where to go. Then, in no hurry, they rose in one piece of dark fur. One bear boy broke away, again tried to get near Amakias. The other looked longingly at her, but the big bear mother abruptly nosed them down the trail. And we're going to stop right there. That is the end of chapter 2. One thing that jumped out at me, and I didn't pause to do a think aloud, was that Amakias, while playing with these baby bears, was so wrapped up in thoughts of how she was going to impress Angeline walking in with these bear cubs, and now Angeline would envy her because she was so great and she made a bond with these bear cubs. That Amakias didn't realize that the mother bear was there. She was so wrapped up in her feelings that she really wasn't paying attention to her surroundings and was actually in very grave danger. So I want you to think carefully about this interaction Amakias had with the bears, and I want you to think very carefully, what do we learn about Amakias in this interaction and through this interaction? What new information do we get about her?